My name is Cora Shaw. I am an Air Force intelligence officer. My world runs on precision, on pattern recognition, and on anticipating threats long before they materialize. The threat on December 23rd did not come from a foreign adversary. It came from a cell phone notification. The text buzzed, sharp and loud, at 11:51 p.m., cutting through the silence of my Colorado Springs apartment. I was packing my standard-issue duffel, half filled with civilian clothes I rarely wore. I picked up the phone, expecting a last-minute request from my mother, Elise. Pick up wine. Bring the good cheese. Don't wear that severe jacket. Instead, I read the words that would redefine the rest of my life. The Winter Gala is for our high-end investors this year. You don't fit the aesthetic. It's best if you stay in Colorado. Stared at the screen. The blue light washed over my hands, making them look pale, almost ghostly. Don't fit the aesthetic. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. An eviction from Christmas. Seconds later, another notification pinged. My brother Leo. A photo popped into the family group chat, Shaw Family Gala Prep. A selfie of him in a tuxedo, holding a glass of scotch, grinning like he owned the world. And then, right below my mother's rejection text, a little heart icon appeared. Leo had liked the message. He had seen me get cut out. And he had endorsed it. Panic is a civilian reaction. I did not have the luxury of it. My pulse didn't even jump. In my line of work, you assess the intel, you verify the source, and you execute a response. I looked at my packed bag. Then I looked at the snow falling steadily outside my window. They thought this text would break me. They thought I'd beg. Apologize for being too stiff, too military, too whatever they decided I was that weak. But they forgot who they were texting. I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was a strategist, and they had just handed me the clearest signal I'd ever received. And typed one word back. Understood. The phone went face down on the nightstand. I walked over to my duffel bag, zipped it shut, and placed it back in the closet. I wasn't going home for Christmas. But I wasn't staying here either, because while they were worrying about aesthetics, I was about to conduct a full audit of my assets. Subscribe to this channel for more stories. I sat in the silence of my military housing. The only sound was the faint hum of the heating vent, struggling against the deepening Colorado cold. I unpacked my bag slowly, methodically folding the civilian sweaters I wouldn't need, putting away the gifts I wouldn't give. This wasn't the first time I'd been pushed to the periphery of my family, but it was the first time they'd formally locked the gate. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the empty duffel. Why didn't I feel more shocked? Why wasn't I sobbing? Because deep down, I knew this text wasn't an anomaly. It was the inevitable conclusion of a 29-year experiment in psychological conditioning. In intelligence work, we study how loyalties are eroded. It rarely happens overnight. It's a slow, gradual process. A drip feed of criticism mixed with just enough praise to keep you hoping. They call it the boiling frog syndrome. My father, Robert, was the undisputed master of the slow boil. I remembered being 23, fresh out of officer training, proud of my commission. I'd come home for a weekend, wearing my service dress. Robert had looked me up and down, frowned, and said, "It's a bit severe, isn't it? Leo is launching a lifestyle brand now. It's exciting." Leo's brand was a line of overpriced athleisure that never went into production, but Robert invested $50,000 in it anyway. I had invested my sweat and blood into serving my country, and I received a critique on the cut of my jacket. That was the temperature rising. Then there was the money. That was always their leverage, not that they gave it to me. No, I was the one who gave. I was the reliable one with the steady government paycheck and the pristine credit score. My mind flashed back to 6 years ago. I was home on leave, exhausted from a deployment rotation. Robert had sat me down in his study, pouring me a whiskey I didn't want. He looked stressed, older. "Cora, we have an opportunity to refinance the chalet," he'd said, sliding a thick stack of papers across his mahogany desk. Rates are at a historic low, but because of the business expansion, code for Leo's latest failure, my debt-to-income ratio is a little high. I need a co-signer. Just a formality, to secure the asset for the family legacy, The magic words, the loan was for $180,000, a staggering sum for a 23-year-old lieutenant. But I looked at my father's face, and for once, he wasn't looking at me with disappointment. He was looking at me with need. I wanted to be needed. I thought I was securing my place at the table. Looking down at my hands now, resting on my knees in the dim light of my apartment, I realized the water had boiled away a long time ago. I wasn't a part of the legacy. I was just the insurance policy, the silent partner who carried the risk while they enjoyed the reward. And now that the aesthetic of the gala mattered more than the person who made it possible, they thought they could just discard me. I stood up and walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. The blue light of the screen illuminated my face, no longer pale, but set in a hard, determined line. They thought the text was the end of the conversation. They thought I would fade away, hurt and silent, just like I always did. But they forgot one critical thing. When you sign a contract, you don't just take on the debt. You also take on the rights. I wasn't going to cry about being uninvited. I was going to find out exactly what I had signed 6 years ago. And I had a very strong feeling that the formality was about to become the most important document of my life. I sat at my makeshift desk, the low hum of my computer, the only sound in the room. Cora Shaw, the daughter, had been wounded, but Captain Shaw, the intel officer, was now fully operational. I logged into my secure cloud storage, bypassing two-factor authentication with practiced ease. I wasn't hunting for classified dossiers. I was searching for something far more personally dangerous. A PDF file titled Shaw Chalet Refinance signed 2019. It took me less than 3 minutes to find it. The file opened, filling the screen with dense legal text. I scrolled past the standard borrower agreements, the interest rate disclosures, the amortization schedules. I was looking for the fine print, the clauses nobody reads because they trust the person asking for the signature. I found it on page 24, buried under a section titled Default and Remedies. Article 14, Section C, Commercial Liability and Asset Protection. In the event the primary collateral, the property, is utilized for commercial purposes, including but not limited to short-term rentals, hospitality services, or event hosting without the express written consent of the cosigner. Said cosigner reserves the right to assume immediate executive control of the property to mitigate liability. The air left my lungs in a quiet rush. Executive control. My father hadn't just needed my credit score. He had needed a guarantor against his own risky business behavior. And in his arrogance, assuming I would never read the contract or never have the spine to enforce it, he had signed away his unilateral authority. I opened a new browser tab. I typed the Shaw Experience Lake Tahoe into the search bar. The results populated instantly. My jaw tightened. It wasn't just a house. It was a brand. There it was on Airbnb, VRBOs, and a dozen luxury rental sites. The Shaw Chalet Experience, Alpine Luxury. The photos were glossy and professional. The description boasted of a curated mountain getaway, perfect for corporate retreats and exclusive events. The nightly rate, $2,500. The calendar was fully booked through February. They weren't broke. They weren't struggling. They were raking in tens of thousands of dollars a month using an asset I was personally liable for. I scrolled through the reviews. Amazing venue for our wedding. Host Robert was charming. The winter gala package is a must. They had monetized my credit risk. They were living like royalty in a castle built on my financial back. And when I became inconvenient to their aesthetic, they tried to lock me out of it. A rage, cold and sharply focused, settled in my chest. This wasn't just familial betrayal. This was financial exploitation and profound legal negligence. They were exposing me to massive liability. If a guest got injured, if a fire started, I would be the one sued. My security clearance, my career, my entire life could be destroyed by their greed. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. I hadn't called in months, I said when he answered. Major Mackenzie was a JAG officer I'd served with in Germany. Brilliant, meticulous, and he owed me a significant favor. Cora? It's midnight. Everything okay? I need a consultation, I said, my voice steady. Hypothetically, if I hold a controlling interest clause in a property deed due to unauthorized commercial use, how quickly can I execute an eviction? I heard the rustle of sheets as he sat up. If you have proof of the commercial use and the deed is solid, about as fast as you can print and serve the paperwork. I have the proof, I said, staring at the glowing Airbnb listing on my screen. I have the deed. Who's the target? Who's the target? Mac asked, his voice shifting into a professional, razor-sharp tone. My parents, I replied. And, Mac? I'm going to need a cease and desist drafted for a business called the Shore Experience. I wasn't staying in Colorado. I was going to Lake Tahoe. It was time to go to war. Lake Tahoe was blindingly white under the winter sun. I drove my rental car not toward the chalet, but to the county clerk's office. The air was thin and sharp, just like my Focus. I had the deed in the listings, but in my world, you secure the perimeter before advancing. Inside the clerk's office, I requested the full property file for the Shore Chalet. I flipped past tax assessments, searching for something specific. Leo had been bragging on social media about new glamping pods in the backyard, luxury yurts with heated floors. Structures like that require permits, especially in a protected environmental zone. I found the permits near the back of the file. Application for accessory dwelling units, 4. The applicant was Robert Shaw, but the signature line for the property owner's authorization bore a signature that stared back at me, a cold betrayal in ink, Cora Shaw. It was my name, but the handwriting wasn't mine. The loops were too wide, the slant too practiced. It was my mother Elise's elegant penmanship. A chill, deeper than the mountain air, settled in my bones. This wasn't just a breach of contract. This was forgery on a federal land use document. As a commissioned officer with a top-secret clearance, my name on a fraudulent document could trigger an investigation that would end my career. They hadn't just used my credit, they had gambled my entire future for the sake of a few luxury yurts. I obtained a certified copy. My phone buzzed as I walked back to the car. An Instagram notification. Leo had posted a story. Gala night, the Shores do it best. I watched the video. The chalet blazed with light. Guests in black tie, my father holding court, my mother laughing with a champagne flute. They were celebrating their theft. I drove toward the mountain with precision, not speed. At 6:30 p.m., I pulled up the heated driveway. A valet moved toward me. Checking in for the gala? Something like that, I said, brushing past. A security guard with a clipboard blocked the grand oak doors. A name? A Cora Shaw. He scanned his list, frowned. I don't see a Cora Shaw. Are you a +1? I pulled the deed from my inner blazer pocket, holding it up so the county seal caught the light. For a step aside. In his moment of confusion, I pushed open the doors. A wall of jazz, laughter, and clinking crystal hit me. The foyer was transformed, a glittering illusion of old money and success. I observed with detached clarity. My parents were performers on a stage financed by my liability. This fantasy only existed as long as the lights stayed on. Leo spotted me first. Cora, he hissed, moving to block me. What are you doing here? You're ruining the vibe. Is that what we're calling federal fraud these days? A vibe? I sidestepped his grab with a fluid motion, leaving him stumbling. I walked straight to the DJ booth, reached past the confused young man, and pulled the main output cable. The music died with a sharp pop. The silence that followed was absolute, every head turning toward me. My father turned, his smile freezing. I stepped into the center of the room, my voice projecting calm authority. The party is over. Everyone needs to leave now. You don't tell my guests to leave. This is my house, I said, cutting through the tension. It isn't. I placed the folder on a central table. This property is under investigation for wire fraudery and unauthorized commercial use involving a commissioned officer. If you remain, you may be considered accessories. I suggest you vacate immediately. Panic is contagious. Within 3 minutes, the room was empty save for the fleeing caterers and my stricken family. My father marched toward me, trembling with rage. You ungrateful child, you've ruined me. I'm not a child, I'm the owner. I opened the folder. Article 14, Section C. You turn this into a hotel without my consent. You breached the contract. I held up the forged permit. And this? Forgery! That's 5 years minimum, Dad? My mother gasped. Cora, we didn't mean harm. We did it for the family. You did it for the money. You risked my career, my freedom, for some yurts. I looked at my watch. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings and vacate. The furniture stays. It's a business asset, and I control the business. We have nowhere to go, my mother wailed. I looked at the hand that had texted me, that had forged my name. You traded your daughter for an aesthetic. Now you have neither. I turned to the security guard. Escort them out in 1 hour. If they resist, call the sheriff. The report is already filed. I walked out, leaving them in the wreckage. 3 days after Christmas, the chalet was empty and silent, a pristine slate. I wasn't selling it. I had a new plan already in motion with contacts at the EVA. This wouldn't be the Shore experience. It would be a retreat for veterans, for the cast out, for the invisible siblings who needed a door held open. No price tag, no aesthetic requirements, just a warm fire. I sat on the hearth, watching the flames dance. For the first time in 29 years, I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I was the one who held all the keys. The most powerful retaliation is a future they can no longer touch.